I don't for a second believe that God has caused or desired this terrible coronavirus pandemic and its suffering, or whatever its long-term wider repercussions may turn out to be throughout the world, not the negative ones anyway. The God of love I believe in, and I hope you do too, is the Good Shepherd of Psalm 23. Jesus, the man of sorrows, acquainted with death for our sake. And he's 100% with us in our suffering and as we walk through times of being in a dark valley. God is indeed our refuge and our strength and our very present help. In our worship on Monday afternoon, Deb pointed us to that verse in Psalm 75 that talks about the earth and its inhabitants tottering. And that word comes into Psalm 46 as well. As I reflect further on this psalm, I think there's a very real sense in which the impact of the coronavirus pandemic across the world is having the effect of bringing uproar to the nations. Economies across the world are tottering. We may even see governments totter as a result of what has been happening. But on a more positive note, of course, at least some wars, if not all violence, at least some wars are to some extent on hold. And it's into this upside down world and an end to business as usual that the divine voice speaking through the psalmist in Psalm 46 utters that familiar command that we thought a little bit about on Monday. Be still and know that I am God. And in the context of Psalm 46, if you take time to pray with that later, you get the sense that these words are almost shouted by God to the world. So often we use this verse from Psalm 46 as a kind of just a little gentle injunction to be still, to be quiet. But I almost get the sense from the context of the psalm as a whole that God is shouting these words above the din of all the stuff that we're normally doing, all the ways in which the world isn't working, and God is saying, be still and know that I am God. For the world at large, and for many of us as individuals in our varying states of being locked down, learning to be still in its broadest sense is exactly what we've been having to do. It's obviously not necessarily a literal experience of stillness, or at least quietness, if you've got children at home, as some of you have. And I know many others are meeting regularly with grandchildren through Zoom, having storytelling sessions and doing other creative things. It's not been a time of stillness either for our many wonderful frontline workers who've been looking after us in so many different ways and keeping essential services going. And we rightly applaud them every Thursday night. But nevertheless, there has been a sense of enforced letting go, releasing, waiting, and of course, loss. And perhaps learning a greater degree of stillness, or at least less busyness and doing and activity of certain kinds, is going to be a continuing and quite possibly continuing to be painful lesson for us all. And I include the church in that. So where are we now? How are we really feeling about it all? We're still in this stage of the retreat, the walking with Jesus, where we're thinking about where are we now? How are we really feeling about everything? And who are we called to be? And what are we called to do as we walk with Jesus in this present time, this season of coronavirus? Perhaps you've already picked up the sense that in many ways I see our calling to walk with Jesus as something that unfolds throughout the course of our lives. It's not a once for all static thing, but it's more of an ongoing journey of discovery. It can sometimes surprise us, take some unexpected turns, and include a few diversions here and there. The unique and extraordinary thing about the pandemic, of course, is that it's an unexpected turn of events that in some way, shape or form is literally affecting everybody on the planet. Natural disasters tend to be very localized, but this is something that is affecting us all. No mere diversion here, but thinking of Psalm 46 again, the whole earth is changing quite literally. Metaphorically, it really has been feeling as though the mountains are shaking and trembling, the sea is roaring and foaming. So we can't ignore its impact on our journeys, whether as individuals, as families, communities, nations, as an international global community, and yes, also the church. We're going to take our break slightly earlier this morning, as I want us, before I say some more a bit later on, I don't want to kind of preempt what you're perhaps going to be praying about and thinking about as we look at our reading today. So we're going to take our break earlier. Yesterday afternoon, we spent some time looking at the passage in Luke's Gospel in which we're first introduced to Jesus's friends, the sisters, Mary and Martha. And today we're going to pray and ponder more of this little family's relationship with Jesus, but this time looking at John's Gospel, the story of the death and resurrection of Lazarus. And for those who've been here over the last couple of days, we've had a little taste of both imaginative listening prayer and Lectio Divina. And I'm going to suggest today that you might like to choose whichever one of those, either that you prefer or that you just feel drawn towards this morning. The instructions for both ways of praying are in your retreat booklets if you need to look at them again. But be open to how God may speak to you through this particular story in the context of all that we've already shared, and this question of what it means to walk with Jesus where we are now in this time of coronavirus. So after our 20-minute break, we'll come back together probably at about 10 past 10. After our 20-minute break, we'll come back and go off in our breakout groups again this morning for a quarter of an hour. And then, as I mentioned, we'll reconvene once more, and I will say some more after that. So, as I say, the reading was too long to actually put into the slides. It would have taken me forever. So if you've got your session handout there or your Bible, you may want to look at that now, but I will put up a slide. So we just get the little trailer for it, those first few words, verse 1. I shall read this through, then invite you to go off into your times of quiet, your times of prayer. And as I say, we'll come back together at 10 past 10. I won't say anything else once I come to the end of the reading. It is a long one. Don't feel that you have to pray with all of it. As I read it through this first time, and as you read it perhaps again on your own, see where it is that you are drawn, whether you're doing Lectio Divina or whether you're doing imaginative listening prayer. See which little part of this story or parts you feel particularly drawn to, and really focus on those, because it is a long passage. Okay, here we go. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill, so the sisters sent a message to Jesus. Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them. After saying this, he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll be all right. Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her, because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there's a stench because he's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upwards and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go."